What is up, my fellow gamers out there? I don't know how about you, but I was always admired these old school computer RPGs from the 90s, these beautiful pixel art dungeon crawlers. There are many has been made, but I admired them from a what? Looking at my little tool and you're probably wondering what the hell is this doing in my game review video. Well, it's going to have a purpose, it's going to have an illustration purpose, but I'm going to leave it here for a while. So, I was really admiring these games because I love dungeon crawlers, I love old school RPGs, but I never really tried them because I felt a bit like, let's say, threatened by them. I felt what is going to have complex mechanics and not even know how to attack the enemies, and it's just probably a complex mess. Well, I was wrong. At least with Lens of Lore, because lately I was checking what kind of game I should play, and on the Retroid Pocket 6, Lens of Lore has been installed for a while because I left it there just in case if maybe I'm going to try it, and I did. And my experience was quite smooth. Before I started to play, I had a really bad itch to play a good dungeon crawler game, you know, when you just gather your party, go into the dungeon, explore it, fight monsters, solving puzzles, finding hidden these switches which opens up doors, and you know the stuff. And I had to say that Lens of Lore scratches that itch just as good as this thing when your back is like itching really bad and you cannot reach it, and you grab it and just like so. Yeah, anyway, so yes, my experience with Lens of Lore was quite good. Is it perfect? No. Is it worth to play? Let's find out. Released in 1993 by Westwood Studios, Lens of Lore, The Throne of Chaos arrived during the golden age of PC role-playing games. At the time, dungeon crawlers were already popular thanks to games like Dungeon Master and Eye of the Beholder. But Westwood wanted to create something more accessible, something with a stronger story and more personality in a world that felt alive. And the result was Lens of Lore, a game that combined dungeon crawling with a much more approachable design philosophy. And judging by the reviews at the time, they succeeded. Gaming magazines praised the graphics, the interface, the accessibility and the production values. The game became one of the most successful RPGs of the early 1990s and is still considered one of Westwood's finest creations. But what about the story? Is it good, average or bad? Let me give you a high-level overview without spoiling it. Well, the story begins in the kingdom of Gladstone. An evil sorceress named Scotia has stolen a powerful magical artifact and begins spreading chaos throughout the land. The king is placed under a curse and only a magic elixir can cure him. Of course, this is not ideal for the prosperity of the kingdom. You are tasked with tracking the evil sorceress down and stopping her before things get even worse. Okay, I won't pretend that the story is revolutionary. If you played RPGs before, you recognize most of the fantasy tropes. But that's okay, because what really surprised me was how alive the adventure feels. One thing I absolutely loved was how much the party talks. Seriously, they are constantly commenting on different events. They are reacting to situations, narrating discoveries, making observations, and a funny thing happens even before you start to play the game. When you are trying to choose your main character, the portraits are starting to talk and trying to convince you to choose that character. I never played an RPG when the available character is trying to convince me to choose him or her. This activity throughout the game from the party members is resulting in a very positive aspect because your companions feel like actual people instead of just walking stat sheets. And in the CD version, the voice acting is fantastic. For a 1993 RPG, it is remarkably well done. And even today it adds a huge amount of charm. I enjoyed it so much. And believe it or not, the most famous voice actor in the Lens of Lore series is Sir Patrick Stewart, who is highly recognized for his role as Captain Jean-Luc Picard in the Star Trek and Professor X in the X-Men franchise. To be honest with you, one of my biggest fears before I attempted to play these games was getting hopelessly lost without a clue what the hell I should do. But that never happened, and this was one of the first positive surprises for me in the game. Because Lens of Lore is surprisingly good at telling you where to go, what to find, what your next objective is. In fact, compared to many RPGs from this era, Lens of Lore is incredibly friendly. The game rarely lets you wander into areas where you absolutely shouldn't be. You're given enough freedom to explore while still gently nudging you in the correct direction. If you would go somewhere you are not belong to, you simply cannot enter the location, or your companions would tell you where you should go. One of the reasons why I wanted to try these games is that I absolutely love these 90s style graphics. It is a special charm that it means a lot for us old school gamers. Okay, now obviously this is a 1993 PC RPG, nobody's going to mistake it for a modern game. But there is something incredibly charming about this visual style. The world is built using large hand-drawn pixel art environments that are packed with detail and personality. The forests feel mysterious, the mines feel dangerous, the castles feel grand, and every location has its own unique atmosphere, even if the variety of the trees and the stones in the mine are very few, but who cares? What I really appreciate is that the developers weren't chasing realism. Instead, they focused on creating a believable fantasy world using artwork. And because of that, the game has aged much more gracefully than many early 3D games from the late 90s. You know how some old polygon games look like somebody built a fantasy world out of cardboard boxes? Lens of Lore avoids that problem entirely. The pixel art still has warmth, it still has character, and most importantly it still sparks the imagination. Even the monster deserves praise. The enemy sprites are large, colorful and surprisingly expressive. Some looks intimidating, some looks weird. If the graphics create the atmosphere, the music completes it. And the CD version soundtrack is incredible. The moment I started playing, I noticed how much the music contributes to the overall experience. Instead of constantly trying to grab your attention, it quietly enhances the adventure. Sometimes it feels mysterious, sometimes it's adventurous, sometimes slightly unsettling, but it always fits what is happening on the screen. Combined with the voice acting, the soundtrack helps create a world that feels surprisingly alive. There were several moments where I found myself stopping for a second just to appreciate the atmosphere. Not because something exciting was happening, but because the game was simply doing a great job of pulling me into its world. And that's one of the biggest compliments I can give to any RPG. When you're not rushing to the next objective, because you're actually enjoying being there. As you've probably seen and guessed by now, dungeon crawling is the main part of the game. And I can probably say that you are constantly in a dungeon even if it not feels like one. Castles, forests and cities are feeling like a dungeon as the corridors and pathways are narrow and you need to constantly check your map often where to go. But yes, the dungeons itself are where most of the game happens. And thankfully they are excellent, they have everything what you want in a dungeon. Hidden switches, traps, secret passages, moving platforms, environmental puzzles. At one point you'll be throwing rocks onto pressure plates. At another you'll be searching walls for hidden mechanisms. And here's a tip from me. Whenever you think you hit a dead end, look for hidden switches, because there's a good chance one is staring you in the face. Thankfully, the game includes an excellent automap, because not all of these old school dungeon crawler games does. And this map is very useful. Hidden walls, levers, various important points of interest, they are all recorded. So, if you are stuck, check the map before checking a walkthrough. The mapping feature is very well done, and it shows everything you need, even the description of what each icon means on the map. Alright, here are a few tips for you if you never played this game before. One thing that can catch newcomers off guard is the progression system. There isn't a traditional level up system, instead characters improve throughout use. Fight more and combat skills improve, cast more spells and magical abilities improve. It's a simple system, but it works well. Another useful tip, use the camp button constantly. Seriously, after almost every battle if necessary. Camping restores health and mana, and it should be your primary recovery method. Save your potions and herbs for emergencies. Also, don't panic if your mage gets knocked out. Every character can cast spells, but the mage is simply much better at it. That means another party member can still heal the mage and get things back under control. Slightly. I love the game, but of course it isn't perfect. There were a few things which frustrated me. Like picking up items from the floor can sometimes feel a real pain in the ass. You occasionally find yourself clicking around like you're trying to pick up a contact lens from a carpet. However, once I turned off the floating cursor feature in the options menu, it solved this problem. I not even know what the hell the floating cursor feature is anyway, but turning it off not affected anything in the game. The only thing it affected was my blood pressure, because it was much more lower after I turned it off. And there is also the occasional puzzle that becomes considerably less obvious. Most of them are logical, but around the middle of the game things can become more complex. The infamous honey and vial situation is a good example. If you fail to use an empty vial on a wasp's nest after you kill the whole colony, you might not get an important ingredient for your main quest. And some dungeon switches and pressure plate puzzles can be quite tricky, so it's not a bad idea to keep a walkthrough around to check out. Because if you miss one important step, and you may find yourself wondering what exactly you are supposed to be doing next. And for some reason you can't compare equipment stats directly. You have to equip the item first to see if it's actually better or worse. This is a minor annoyance, but still annoyance. And well, all that said, none of these issues were that annoying or frustrating that I wanted to stop playing, as I enjoyed the gameplay, and these issues only cast a tiny shadow on my experience. What really impressed me was the difficulty balance. The game challenges you without becoming frustrating. When enemies starts becoming dangerous, better equipment often appears shortly afterwards. You feel progression constantly, and you do not have to grind. As a matter of fact, I don't think you can even grind, as the enemies are not respawning. Once you clear the area, you are 99% good. There are also parts where you have to think and plan your approach. I remember encountering a gigantic sludge creature in the mines. At first I was tried fighting it normally as I would. Bad idea. It destroyed me and even disarmed me. Yes, you heard that right, all my equipment has been dropped to the floor. Well, after failing quite a few times, I realized I need a different approach. Retreat, rest, return, and cast poison on the bastard from the distance. And it worked. And that's exactly the kind of challenge I enjoy. Not impossible, just clever enough to make me rethink my strategy. Lens of Lore completely shattered my expectations. I expected a complicated relic from a bygone era. What I found was a solid and accessible RPG with fantastic atmosphere, excellent voice acting, and enjoyable dungeon design, and enough charm to keep me hooked for hours, for a lot of hours. And more importantly, it showed me that old school dungeon crawlers don't have to be intimidating, they don't have to be clunky, and they certainly don't have to be impossible to enjoy today. If you ever looked at classic dungeon crawlers and thought, nah, those games seems interesting, but where do I even start? Well, the Lens of Lore might be the one of the best starting points you could ask for, because after playing it, I don't just want to finish Lens of Lore, I suddenly want to explore an entire genre I've been avoiding for years. And if a game released in 1993 can still do that, more than 30 years later, it must be doing something right. So, should you play Lens of Lore? Should you play Lens of Lore? Yes, if you love old school dungeon crawlers or you love the whole dungeon crawler genre, definitely give this one a try. Even if you haven't tried these kind of old school computer RPG games, it's still definitely good entry into this kind of gaming genre, because it's, I would say it's player friendly. It not overwhelms you with different very complex mechanics, and it gently just guides you where you have to go. It's easy to learn, and even the whole manual is just, I don't know, like 5-6 pages, so it's very easy to learn. But without the manual, it was very easy for me to use the interface and just to navigate around the game. And I'm really glad that I played it, because I really love dungeon crawlers, and now I'm more confident that I'm going to try these old school games, because there's a whole universe of them and there are so many to play. I already wrote a list for myself, which once I'm going to play, so my backlog is just keep growing. I keep doing these videos, but it doesn't matter how many videos I do, my backlog will just keep growing, so it's just insane. But anyway, everybody loves playing good games. I love playing good games as well. So yes, definitely give Lens of Lore a try, even if you haven't played it for a very long time, or if you're a seasoned veteran. Definitely let me know in the comments below if you played it, how did you enjoy it. And now check out this video. This is Etrian Odyssey 3 on the Nintendo DS. It's definitely a fantastic dungeon crawler game. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'm going to see you in the next Backlog Quest video. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.